and then the end point is the basket, and you count how many throws it takes you to get it in the basket for each hole, and then you progress along the course.
Get you.
The caddy's job is much easier.
Oh.
It's the second best way of ruining a good walk.
Hey everybody, Joanna!
Oh, Joanna's here!
Hey Joanna, you made it! And Tris, you made it! I thought we weren't going to have you tonight.
Yeah, I was going to say that I cancelled my thing just to be here with you all, but my thing got cancelled, so I...
Oh.
Thanks for cancelling it.
Yeah, it's all right. No, you don't have to be bothered about it.
After the drama of yesterday's after chat and the audio recording exchange that we did, I couldn't miss it.
What happened in the after chat?
It was in the after chat, you're right.
It was intense.
First rule of after chat is don't talk about after chat.
Hey, Kirsty, hi Rory, hi Michael. Hey everybody.
Hello. How are you, Alba?
Good. I'm discovering frisbee golf.
Fantastic.
I just started Googling it and what it looks like.
It's really good. So you get different weighted discs which can go for miles or can really curve. It's cool.
Well, there's only one proper weighted disc for Ultimate Frisbee. As in, there's one standard.
Hammer.
Yeah.
Do they have to ship it whenever a game's happening?
What, sorry?
Do they have to ship the one disc to whoever's playing Ultimate Frisbee?
Yeah, is it like the Olympic torch?
Yeah.
That's why they call it Ultimate Frisbee, because that is the Ultimate Frisbee.
Yeah, but it's also much easier to pass around than the Olympic torch.
It's not on fire?
Yeah, and like you can throw it.
It flies better.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Several reasons, right? Like
they should replace the Olympic torch with that. Just set the Ultimate Frisbee on fire.
They've only got one, Frankie.
Extreme Frisbee.
5 Arabies.
Upgrading the discus event.
I'd love to play Fire Frisbee. Who's in?
Could you play fire with a hammer?
I like fire. I like
or a
fire.
child with pigtails.
Get your asbestos gloves on. We'll have a go.
I have asbestos gloves.
Of course you do.
Of course you do.
When Vivian...
They're like giant oven mitts. They're yellow.
I love you, Ainsley.
When I lived with Vivian in Oxford, we had a flatmate called Andy, and he had a frisbee with LEDs around the outside of it. We used to go out and play frisbee in the dark, but it's like because you see it pretty well, but it's really weird playing frisbee in the dark while stoned because there's no perception at all. Yeah, you see where the frisbee is, but no reference point. So it's like, ah!
So, question. I have a follow-up question. Was there actually a light-up frisbee, or were you all just like high as kites out there in the dark, like?
Like we weren't full on hallucinating.
Yeah, I've got a glow in the dark one, but I think Andrew's one sounds more fun.
So my friends organised this Storytime thing in Bristol, which is like everybody meets up in a theatre and tells true stories about their lives. And one of the stories that this woman told was how she was at the first Glastonbury, or one of the very early Glastonburys, and her boyfriend was being a complete dick, made her go and get drugs for them, and then refused to take them when she came back with drugs that she'd spent hours finding for him. So she took all of them at once in a like, fuck you kind of gesture, wandered off, had some like experiences looking at the police camp and the hippie camp, watched the whole of the Pink Floyd set, which was Ummagumma, which is their real like druggy music. A couple of days later, there was an article in the newspaper about how Pink Floyd's van broke down and they never made it to Glastonbury.
Nice. Oh my God, is everyone eating ice creams?
Only if you're called.
Only Michaels are eating ice creams.
Yeah.
Oh, is this some sort of special Michael? Is this Michael Club?
Yeah.
First rule of Michael Club.
Eat an ice cream.
You get an ice cream.
Is Malcolm close enough to Michael?
No.
You can eat cream or ice, but that's it.
You can have a yogurt, Malcolm.
Frankie.
Frankie.
You can suck frozen fruit.
That's me. That's me. That's my name.
Haagen-Dazs does a Biscoff ice cream.
What?
Fuck off.
Wait, what? What? What?
Stop everything.
How have I not seen this?
What?
I got it in like a mini tub set. It's called Speculoos Biscuit Ice Cream.
What?
Nice.
It's so good.
There's a Belgian like artisan coffee maker, ice cream maker here in Barcelona who makes them, and they're so good.
Frankie, it'll be okay. We'll find you some, and it will be okay. Don't worry.
Promise?
Deep breaths. It'll be fine.
Okay.
Why do we have a Nick?
It's all right. I'm back. Thank you.
Got you back.
Man, I've eaten almost all my snacks, and the story hasn't even started yet.
Holy shit.
Wow.
That was just pure snack preparation.
They were so good. I was just like,
You were just like, what? What were you like?
like that.
Is it story time already?
Sorry?
Oh shit, story time! Every time I come on the pre-chat, I have such a nice time talking to everyone that sometimes I forget why we're here. Right.
How is Malcolm making noise when he's not even at his computer?
Malcolm, babe, must you?
He's
Muted! Okay, so how do we feel about some story time? You feel good about it? Right. I feel very good about story time. Hi, Ian. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Chapter 3, The School for Wizards. Ged slept that night aboard Shadow, and early in the morning parted with those first sea comrades of his, they shouting good wishes cheerily after him as he went up the docks. The town of Thwil is not large, its high houses huddling close over a few steep, narrow streets. To Ged, however, it seemed a city, and not knowing where to go, he asked the first townsman of Thwil he met where he would find the warder of the school on Roke. The man looked at him sidelong a while and said, "The wise don't need to ask. The fool asks in vain," and so went on along the street. Ged went uphill till he came out into a square, rimmed on 3 sides by the houses with their sharp slate roofs, and on the 4th side by the wall of a great building, whose few small windows were higher than the chimney tops of the houses. A fort or castle it seemed, built of mighty grey blocks of stone. In the square beneath it, market booths were set up, and there was some coming and going of people. Ged asked his question of an old woman with a basket of mussels, and she replied, "You cannot always find the warder where he is, but sometimes you find him where he is not," and went on crying her mussels to sell. In the great building near one corner there was a mean little door of wood. Ged went to this and knocked loud. To the old man who opened the door he said, "I bear a letter from the Mage Orgian of Gaunt to the warder of the school on this island. I want to find the warder, but I will not hear more riddles and scoffing." "This is the school," the old man said mildly. "I am the doorkeeper. Enter if you can." Ged stepped forward. It seemed to him that he had passed through the doorway, yet he stood outside on the pavement where he had stood before. Once more he stepped forward, and once more he remained standing outside the door. The doorkeeper inside watched him with mild eyes. Ged was not so much baffled as angry, for this seemed like a further mockery to him. With voice and hand, he made the opening spell, which his aunt had taught him long ago. It was the prize among all her stock of spells, and he wove it well now. But it was only a witch's charm, and the power that held this doorway was not moved at all. When that failed, Ged stood a long while there on the pavement. At last he looked at the old man who waited inside. "I cannot enter," he said unwillingly, "unless you help me." The doorkeeper answered, "Say your name." Then again, Ged stood still for a while. For a man never speaks his own name aloud unless more than his life's safety is at stake. "I am Ged," he said aloud. Stepping forward then, he entered the open doorway. Yet it seemed to him that though the light was behind him, a shadow followed him in at his heels. He saw also as he turned that the doorway through which he had come was not plain wood as he had thought, but ivory without joint or seam. It was cut, as he knew later, from a tooth of the great dragon. The door that the old man closed behind him was of polished horn, through which the daylight shone dimly, and on its inner face was carved the 1,000-leaved tree. "Welcome to this house, lad," the doorkeeper said, and without saying more, led him through halls and corridors to an open court far inside the walls of the building. The court was partly paved with stone, but was roofless, and on a grass plot a fountain played under young trees in the sunlight. There Ged waited alone some time. He stood still, and his heart beat hard, for it seemed to him that he felt presences and powers at work unseen about him here, and he knew that this place was built not only of stone, but of magic stronger than stone. He stood in the innermost room of the House of the Wise, and it was open to the sky. Then suddenly he was aware of a man clothed in white who watched him through the falling water of the fountain. As their eyes met, a bird sang aloud in the branches of the tree. In that moment, Ged understood the singing of the bird, and the language of the water falling in the basin of the fountain, and the shape of the clouds, and the beginning and end of the wind that stirred the leaves. It seemed to him that he himself was a word spoken by the sunlight. Then that moment passed, and he and the world were as before, or almost as before. He went forward to kneel before the Archmage, holding out to him the letter written by Ogier. The Archmage Nemeli, warder of Roke, was an old man, older, it was said, than any man living. His voice quavered like a bird's voice when he spoke, welcoming Ged kindly. His hair and beard and robe were white, and he seemed as if all darkness and heaviness had been leached out of him by the slow usage of the years, leaving him white and worn as driftwood that has been a century adrift. "My eyes are old. I cannot read what your master writes," he said in his quavering voice. "Read me the letter, lad." So Ged made out and read aloud the writing, which was in Hardic runes, and said no more than this: "Lord Nemeli, I send you one who will be greatest of the wizards of Gaunt, if the wind blow true." This was signed not with Ogion's true name, which Ged had never yet learned, but with Ogion's rune, the closed mouth. "He who holds the earthquake on a leash has sent you, for which be doubly welcome. Young Ogion was dear to me when he came here from Gaunt. Now, tell me of the seas and portents of your voyage, lad." "A fair passage, lord, but for the storm yesterday." "What ship brought you here?" "Shadow, trading from the Andrades." "Whose will sent you here?" "My own." The Archmage looked at Ged and looked away, and began to speak in a tongue that Ged did not understand, mumbling as will an old man whose wits go wandering among the years and islands. Yet in among his mumbling there were words of what the bird had sung and what the water had said falling. He was not laying a spell, and yet there was a power in his voice that moved Ged's mind so that the boy was bewildered, and for an instant seemed to behold himself standing in a strange, vast desert place, alone among shadows. Yet all along he was in the sunlit court, hearing the fountain fall. A great black bird, a raven of Oskill, came walking over the stone terrace in the grass. It came to the hem of the Archmage's robe and stood there, all black, with its dagger beak and eyes like pebbles, staring sidelong at Ged. It pecked 3 times on the white staff Nemely leaned on, and the old wizard ceased his muttering and smiled. "Run and play, lad," he said at last, as to a little child. Ged knelt again on one knee to him. When he rose, the Archmage was gone. Only the raven stood eyeing him, its beak outstretched as if to peck the vanished staff. It spoke in what Ged guessed might be the speech of Oskill. "Terren on Uzbuk," it said, croaking. "Terren on Uzbuk orek," and it strutted off as it had come. Ged turned to leave the courtyard, wondering where he should go. Under the archway, he was met by a tall youth who greeted him very courteously, bowing his head. "I am called Jasper, Enwit's son of the domain of Eolg on Havnor Isle. I am at your service today to show you about the great house and answer your questions as I can. How shall I call you, sir?" Now it seemed to Ged, a mountain villager who had never been among the sons of rich merchants and noblemen, that this fellow was scoffing at him with his service and his sir and his bowing and scraping. He answered shortly, "Sparrowhawk, they call me." The other waited a moment as if expecting some more mannerly response, and getting none, straightened up and turned a little aside. He was 2 or 3 years older than Ged, very tall, and he moved and carried himself with stiff grace, posing, Ged thought, like a dancer. He wore a grey cloak with hood thrown back. The first place he took Ged was the wardrobe room, where, as a student of the school, Ged might find himself another such cloak that fitted him, and any other clothing he might need. He put on the dark grey cloak he had chosen, and Jasper said, "Now you are one of us." Jasper had a way of smiling faintly as he spoke, which made Ged look for a jeer hidden in his polite words. "Do clothes make the mage?" he answered, sullen. "No," said the older boy, "though I have heard that manners make the man. Where now?" "Where you will. I do not know the house." Jasper took him down the corridors of the great house, showing him the open courts and the roofed halls, the room of shelves where the books of lore and rune tomes were kept, the great hearth hall where all the school gathered on festival days, and upstairs in the towers and under the roofs, the small cells where the students and masters slept. Ged's was in the south tower, with a window looking down over the steep roofs of Thwill town to the sea. Like the other sleeping cells, it had no furnishing but a straw-filled mattress in the corner. "We live very plain here," said Jasper, "but I expect you won't mind that." "I'm used to it." Presently, trying to show himself an equal of this polite, disdainful youth, he added, "I suppose you weren't when you first came." Jasper looked at him, and his look said without words, "What could you possibly know about what I, son of the lord of the domain of Eol on the island of Havnor, am or am not used to?" What Jasper said aloud was simply, "Come on this way." A gong had been rung while they were upstairs, and they came down to eat the noon meal at the long table of the refectory, along with 100 or more boys and young men. Each waited on himself, joking with the cooks through the window hatches of the kitchen that opened in through the refectory, loading his plate from great bowls of food that steamed on the sills, sitting where he pleased at the long table. "They say," Jasper told Ged, "that no matter how many sit at this table, there is always room." Certainly there was room both for many noisy groups of boys talking and eating mightily, and for older fellows, their grey cloaks clasped with silver at the neck, who sat more quietly by pairs or alone, with grave, pondering faces as if they had much to think about. Jasper took Ged to sit with a heavy-set fellow called Vetch, who said nothing much but shoveled in his food with a will. He had the accent of the East Reach and was very dark of skin, not red-brown like Ged and Jasper and most folk of the archipelago, but black-brown. He was plain and his manners were not polished. He grumbled about the dinner when he had finished it, but then turning to Ged, he said, "At least it's not illusion like so much around here. It sticks to your ribs." Ged did not know what he meant, but he felt a certain liking for him and was glad when, after the meal, he stayed with them. They went down into the town that Ged might learn his way about it. Few and short as were the streets of Thwyl, they turned and twisted curiously among the high-roofed houses, and the way was easy to lose. It was a strange town, and strange also its people. Fishermen and workmen and artisans like any other, but so used to the sorcery that is ever at play on the Isle of the Wise that they seemed half sorcerers themselves. They talked, as Ged had learned, in riddles, and not one of them would blink to see a boy turn into a fish or a house fly up into the air, but knowing it for a schoolboy prank would go on cobbling shoes or cutting up mutton, unconcerned. Coming up past the back door and around through the gardens of the great house, the three boys crossed the clear running Thwylburn on a wooden bridge and went on northward among woods and pastures. The path climbed and wound. They passed oak groves where shadows lay thick for all the brightness of the sun. There was one grove not far away to the left that Ged could never quite see plainly. The path never reached it, though it always seemed to be about to. He could not even make out what kind of trees they were. Vetch, seeing him gazing, said softly, "That is the imminent grove. We can't come there yet." In the hot sunlit pastures, yellow flowers bloomed. "Sparkweed," said Jasper. "They grow where the wind dropped the ashes of Burling Ilion, when Erith Kaabi defended the inward isles from the Fire Lord." He blew on a withered flower head, and the seeds shaken loose went up on the wind like sparks of fire in the sun. The path led them up and around the base of a great green hill, round and treeless, the hill that Ged had seen from the ship as they entered the charmed waters of Roke Island. On the hillside, Jasper halted. "At home in Havnor, I heard much about Gontish wizardry, and always in praise, so that I've wanted for a long time to see the manner of it. Here now we have a Gontishman, and we stand on the slopes of Roke Knoll, whose roots go down to the centre of the earth. All spells are strong here. Play us a trick, Sparrowhawk. Show us your style." Ged, confused and taken aback, said nothing. "Later on, Jasper," Vetch said in his plain way. "Let him be a while." "He has either skill or power, or the doorkeeper wouldn't have let him in. Why shouldn't he show it, now as well as later? Right, Sparrowhawk?" "I have both skill and power," Ged said. "Show me what kind of thing you're talking about." "Illusions, of course. Tricks, games of seeming. Like this." Pointing his finger, Jasper spoke a few strange words, and where he pointed on the hillside among the green grasses, a little thread of water trickled and grew, and now a spring gushed out and the water went running down the hill. Ged put his hand in the stream and it felt wet, drank of it, and it was cool. Yet for all that it would quench no thirst, being but illusion. Jasper, with another word, stopped the water, and the grasses waved dry in the sunlight. "Now you, Vetch," he said with his cool smile. Vetch scratched his head and looked glum, but he took up a bit of earth in his hand and began to sing tunelessly over it, moulding it with his dark fingers and shaping it, pressing it, stroking it. And suddenly it was a small creature, like a bumblebee or furry fly, that flew humming off over Roke Knoll and vanished. Ged stood staring, crestfallen. What did he know but mere village witchery, spells to call goats, cure warts, move loads, or mend pots? "I do no such tricks as these," he said. That was enough for Vetch, who was for going on, but Jasper said, "Why don't you?" "Sorcery is not a game. We Gontish men do not play it for pleasure or praise," Ged answered haughtily. "What do you play it for?" Jasper inquired. "Money?" "No." But he could not think of anything more to say that would hide his ignorance and save his pride. Jasper laughed, not ill-humouredly, and went on, leading them around Roke Knoll. And Ged followed, sullen and sore-hearted, knowing he had behaved like a fool, and blaming Jasper for it. That night, as he lay wrapped in his cloak on the mattress in his cold, unlit cell of stone, in the utter silence of the great house of Roke, the strangeness of the place and the thought of all the spells and sorceries that had been worked there began to come over him heavily. Darkness surrounded him. Dread filled him. He wished he were anywhere else but Roke. But Vetch came to the door, a little bluish ball of wear-light nodding over his head to light the way, and asked if he could come in and talk a while. He asked Ged about Gaunt, and then spoke fondly of his own home isles of the East Reach, telling how the smoke of village hearth-fires is blown across that quiet sea at night, between the small islands with funny names, Corp, Cop and Hop, Venway and Venish, Ithish, Coppish and Sneg. When he sketched the shapes of those islands on the stones of the floor with his finger to show Ged how they lay, the lines he drew shone dim, as if he'd drawn with a stick of silver for a while before they faded. Vetch had been 3 years at the school and soon would be made sorcerer. He thought no more of performing the lesser arts of magic than a bird thinks of flying. Yet a greater unlearned skill he possessed, which was the art of kindness. That night, and always from then on, he offered and gave Ged friendship, a sure and open friendship, which Ged could not help but return. Yet Vetch was also friendly to Jasper, who had made Ged into a fool that first day on Roke Knoll. Ged would not forget this, nor, it seemed, would Jasper, who always spoke to him with a polite voice and a mocking smile. Ged's pride would not be slighted or condescended to. He swore to prove to Jasper, and to all the rest of them, among whom Jasper was something of a leader, how great his power really was, someday. For none of them, for all their clever tricks, had saved a village by wizardry. Of none of them had Ogian written that he would be the greatest wizard of Gaunt. So, bolstering up his pride, he set all his strong will on the work they gave him, the lessons and crafts and histories and skills taught by the grey-cloaked masters of Roke, who were called the Nine. Parts of each day he studied with the master chanter, learning the deeds of heroes and the lays of wisdom, beginning with the oldest of all songs, the creation of Ea. Then, with a dozen other lads, he would practice with the master wind key at arts of wind and weather. Whole bright days of spring and early summer they spent out in Roke Bay in light car boats, practicing steering by word and stilling waves, and speaking to the world's wind and raising up the mage wind. These are very intricate skills, and frequently Ged's head got whacked by the swinging boom as the boat jibed under a wind slowly blowing backwards, or his boat and another collided, though they had the whole bay to navigate in, or all 3 boys in his boat went swimming unexpectedly as the boat was swamped by a huge, unintended wave. There were quieter expeditions ashore other days, with the master herbal who taught the ways and properties of things that grow, and the master hand taught sleight and jugglery and the lesser arts of changing. At all these studies, Ged was apt, and within a month was bettering lads who had been a year at Roke before him. Especially the tricks of illusion came to him so easily that it seemed he had been born knowing them and needed only to be reminded. The master hand was a gentle and light-hearted old man who had endless delight in the wit and beauty of the crafts he taught. Ged soon felt no awe of him, but asked him for this spell and that spell, and always the master smiled and showed him what he wanted. But one day, having it in mind to put Jasper to shame at last, Ged said to the master hand in the court of seeming, "Sir, all these charms are much the same. Knowing one, you know them all. And as soon as the spell weaving ceases, the illusion vanishes. Now, if I make a pebble into a diamond," and he did so with a word and a flick of his wrist, "what must I do to make that diamond remain diamond? How is the changing spell locked and made to last?" The master hand looked at the jewel that glittered on Ged's palm, bright as the prize of a dragon's hoard. The old master murmured one word, "Tolk," and there lay the pebble, no jewel but a rough grey bit of rock. The master took it and held it out in his own hand. "This is a rock. Tolk in the true speech," he said, looking mildly up at Ged now. "A bit of the stone of which Roke Isle is made, a little bit of the dry land on which men live. It is itself. It is part of the world. By the illusion change, you can make it look like a diamond, or a flower, or a fly, or an eye, or a flame." The rock flickered from shape to shape as he named them and returned to rock. But that is mere seeming. Illusion fools the beholder's senses. It makes him see and hear and feel that the thing is changed. But it does not change the thing. To change this rock into a jewel, you must change its true name. And to do that, my son, even to so small a scrap of the world, is to change the world. It can be done. Indeed, it can be done. It is the art of the master changer, and you will learn it when you are ready to learn it. But you must not change one thing, one pebble, one grain of sand, until you know what good and evil will follow on that act. The world is in balance, in equilibrium. A wizard's power of changing and of summoning can shake the balance of the world. It is dangerous, that power. It is most perilous. It must follow knowledge and serve need. To light a candle is to cast a shadow. He looked down at the pebble again. "A rock is a good thing too, you know," he said, speaking less gravely. "If the isles of Earthsea were all made of diamond, we'd lead a hard life here. Enjoy illusions, lad, and let rocks be rocks." He smiled, but Ged left dissatisfied. Press a mage for his secrets, and he would always talk, like Ogion, about balance and danger and the dark. But surely a wizard, one who had gone past these childish tricks of illusion to the true arts of summoning and change, was powerful enough to do what he pleased, and balance the world as seemed best to him, and drive back darkness with his own light. In the corridor, he met Jasper, who, since Ged's accomplishments began to be praised about the school, spoke to him in a way that seemed more friendly, but was more scoffing. "You look gloomy, Sparrowhawk," he said now. "Did your juggling charms go wrong?" Seeking, as always, to put himself on equal footing with Jasper, Ged answered the question, ignoring its ironic tone. "I'm sick of juggling," he said. "Sick of these illusion tricks, fit only to amuse idle lords in their castles and domains. The only true magic they've taught me yet on Roke is making wear-light and some weatherworking. Rest is mere foolery." "Even foolery is dangerous," said Jasper, "in the hands of a fool." At that, Ged turned as if he had been slapped and took a step towards Jasper. But the older boy smiled as if he had not intended any insult, nodded his head in his stiff, graceful way, and went on. Standing there with rage in his heart, looking after Jasper, Ged swore to himself to outdo his rival, and not in some mere illusion match, but in a test of power. He would prove himself and humiliate Jasper. He would not let the fellow stand there looking down at him, graceful, disdainful, hateful. Ged did not stop to think why Jasper might hate him. He only knew why he hated Jasper. The other apprentices had soon learned they could seldom match themselves against Ged, either in sport or in earnest, and they said of him, some in praise and some in spite, "He's a wizard born, he'll never let you beat him." Jasper alone neither praised him nor avoided him, but simply looked down at him, smiling slightly. And therefore Jasper stood alone as his rival, who must be put to shame. He did not see, or would not see, that in this rivalry, which he clung to and fostered as part of his own pride, there was anything of the danger, the darkness, of which the master hand had mildly warned him. When he was not moved by pure rage, he knew very well that he was as yet no match for Jasper, nor any of the older boys, and so he kept at his work and went on as usual. At the end of summer, the work was slackened somewhat, so there was more time for sport. Spellboat races down in the harbour, feats of illusion in the courts of the great house, and in the long evenings in the groves, wild games of hide and seek, where hiders and seeker were both invisible, and only voices moved laughing and calling among the trees, following and dodging the quick, faint wear-lights. Then, as autumn came, they set to their tasks afresh, practising new magic. So Ged's first months at Roke went by fast, full of passions and wonders. In winter, it was different. He was sent with 7 other boys across Roke Island to the farthest northmost cape, where stands the Isolate Tower. There by himself lived the Master Namer, who was called by a name that has no meaning in any language, Curem Carmeruk. No farm or dwelling lay within miles of the tower. Grim it stood above the northern cliffs, grey were the clouds over the seas of winter, endless the lists and ranks and rounds of names that the namer's 8 pupils must learn. Amongst them in the tower's high room, Curem Carmeruk sat on a high seat, writing down lists of names that must be learned before the ink faded at midnight, leaving the parchment blank again. It was cold and half dark and always silent there, except for the scratching of the master's pen and the sighing, maybe, of a student who must learn before midnight the name of every cape, point, bay, sound, inlet, channel, harbour, shallows, reef and rock of the shores of Losso, a little islet of the Pelnish Sea. If the student complained, the master might say nothing, but lengthen the list. Or he might say, "He would be sea master, must know the true name of every drop of water in the sea." Ged sighed sometimes, but he did not complain. He saw that in this dusty and fathomless manner of learning the true name of every place, thing and being, the power he wanted lay like a jewel at the bottom of a dry well. For magic consists in this, the true naming of a thing. So Curem Carmeruk had said to them once, their first night in the tower. He never repeated it, but Ged did not forget his words. "Many a mage of great power," he had said, "has spent his whole life to find out the name of one single thing, one single lost or hidden name, and still the lists are not finished, nor will they be till world's end. Listen, and you will see why. In the world under the sun, and in the other world that has no sun, there is much that has nothing to do with men and men's speech, and there are powers beyond our power. But magic, true magic, is worked only by those beings who speak the Hardic tongue of Earthsea, or the old speech from which it grew. That is the language dragons speak, and the language Seagoy spoke, who made the islands of the world, and the language of our lays and songs, spells, enchantments, and invocations. Its words lie hidden and changed among our Hardic words. We call the foam on waves Sukien. That word is made from two words of the old speech, suk, feather, and inyen, the sea. Feather of the sea is foam, but you cannot charm the foam calling it Sukien. You must use its own true name in the old speech, which is Essa. Any witch knows a few of these words in the old speech, and a mage knows many. But there are many more, and some have been lost over the ages, and some have been hidden, and some are known only to dragons and to the old powers of earth, and some are known to no living creature, and no man could learn them all, for there is no end to that language. Here is the reason. The sea's name is Inyen, well and good. But what we call the inmost sea has its own name also in the old speech. Since no thing can have two true names, Inyen can mean only all sea except the inmost sea. And of course it does not mean even that, for there are seas and bays and straits beyond counting that bear names of their own. So if some mage sea master were mad enough to try to lay a spell of storm or calm over all the ocean, his spell must say not only that word Inyen, but the name of every stretch and bit and part of the sea through all the archipelago and all the outer reaches and beyond to where names cease. Thus, that which gives us the power to work magic sets the limits of that power. A mage can control only what is near him, what he can name exactly and wholly. And this is well. If it were not so, the wickedness of the powerful or the folly of the wise would long ago have sought to change what cannot be changed, and equilibrium would fail. The unbalanced sea would overwhelm the islands where we perilously dwell, and in the old silence all voices and all names would be lost. Ged thought long on these words, and they went deep in his understanding. Yet the majesty of the task could not make the work of that long year in the tower less hard and dry. And at the end of the year, Kuram Kamaruk said to him, "You have made a good beginning," but no more. Wizards speak truth, and it was true that all the mastery of names that Ged had toiled to win that year was the mere start of what he must go on learning all his life. He was let go from the isolate tower sooner than those who had come with him, for he had learned quicker, but that was all the praise he got. He walked south across the island alone in the early winter, along townless, empty roads. As night came on, it rained. He set no charm to keep the rain off him, for the weather of rope was in the hands of the master wind key and might not be tampered with. He took shelter under a great pendic tree, and lying there wrapped in his cloak, he thought of his old master Ogion, who might still be on his autumn wanderings over the height of Gaunt, sleeping out with leafless branches for a roof and falling rain for house walls. That made Ged smile, for he found the thought of Ogion always a comfort to him. He fell asleep with a peaceful heart, there in the cold darkness full of the whisper of water. At dawn, waking, he lifted his head. The rain had ceased. He saw, sheltered in the folds of his cloak, a little animal curled up asleep which had crept there for warmth. He wondered, seeing it, for it was a rare, strange beast, an otak. These creatures are found only on 4 southern isles of the archipelago, Roke, Ensmer, Podi, and Wathort. They are small and sleek, with broad faces, and fur dark brown or brindle, and great bright eyes. Their teeth are cruel and their temper fierce, so they are not made pets of. They have no call or cry or any voice. Ged stroked this one, and it woke and yawned, showing a small brown tongue and white teeth, but it was not afraid. "Otak," he said. And then, remembering the 1,000 names of beasts he had learned in the tower, he called it by its true name in the old speech. "Hoeg, do you want to come with me?" The otak sat itself down on his open hand and began to wash its fur. He put it up on his shoulder in the folds of his hood, and there it rode. Sometimes during the day it jumped down and darted off into the woods, but it always came back to him, once with a wood mouse it had caught. He laughed and told it to eat the mouse, for he was fasting, this night being the festival of sun return. So he came in the wet dusk past Roke Knoll, and saw bright werelights playing in the rain over the roofs of the great house, and he entered there and was welcomed by his masters and companions in the firelit hall. It was like a homecoming to Ged, who had no home to which he could ever return. He was happy to see so many faces he knew, and happiest to see Vetch come forward to greet him with a wide smile on his dark face. He had missed his friend this year more than he knew. Vetch had been made sorcerer this fall and was apprenticed no more, but that set no barrier between them. They fell to talking at once, and it seemed to Ged that he said more to Vetch in that first hour than he had said during the whole long year at the Isolate Tower. The otak still rode his shoulder, nestling in the fold of his hood as they sat at dinner at the long tables set up for the festival in the hearth hall. Vetch marvelled at the little creature, and once put up his hand to stroke it, but the otak snapped its sharp teeth at him. He laughed. They say, Sparrowhawk, that a man favoured by a wild beast is a man to whom the old powers of stone and spring will speak in human voice. They say Gontish wizards often keep familiars, said Jasper, who sat on the other side of Vetch. Our Lord Nemely has his raven, and songs say the Red Mage of Ark led a wild war on a gold chain, but I never heard of any sorcerer keeping a rat in his hood. At that they all laughed, and Ged laughed with them. It was a merry night, and he was joyful to be there in the warmth and merriment, keeping festival with his companions. But, like all Jasper ever said to him, the jest set his teeth on edge. That night, the Lord of O was a guest of the school, himself a sorcerer of renown. He had been a pupil of the Archmage, and returned sometimes to Roke for the winter festival or the long dance in summer. With him was his lady, slender and young, bright as new copper, her black hair crowned with opals. It was seldom that any woman sat in the halls of the great house, and some of the old masters looked at her sidelong, disapproving. But the young men looked at her with all their eyes. For such a one, said Vetch to Ged, I could work vast enchantments. He sighed and laughed. She's only a woman, Ged replied. The Princess Elffarin was only a woman, said Vetch, and for her sake all Enlad was laid waste, and the hero Mage of Havnor died, and the island Solea sank beneath the sea. Old tales, said Ged. But then he too began to look at the Lady of O, wondering if indeed this was such mortal beauty as the old tales told of. The master chanter had sung the Deed of the Young King, and all together had sung the Winter Carol. Now, when there was a little pause before they all rose from the tables, Jasper got up and went to the table nearest the hearth, where the Archmage and the guests and masters sat, and he spoke to the Lady of O. Jasper was no longer a boy, but a young man, tall and comely, with his cloak clasped at the neck with silver, for he also had been made sorcerer this year, and the silver clasp was the token of it. The lady smiled at what he said, and the opals shone in her black hair, radiant. Then, the masters nodding benign consent, Jasper worked an illusion charm for her. A white tree he made spring up from the stone floor. Its branches touched the high roof beams of the hall, and on every twig of every branch a golden apple shone, each a sun, for it was the year tree. A bird flew among the branches suddenly, all white with a tail like a fall of snow, and the golden apples dimming turned to seeds, each one a drop of crystal. These, falling from the tree with a sound like rain, all at once there came a sweet fragrance, while the tree, swaying, put forth leaves of rosy fire and white flowers like stars. So the illusion faded. The Lady of O cried out with pleasure, and bent her shining head to the young sorcerer in praise of his mastery. "Come with us, live with us in Otogny. Can ye not come, my lord?" she asked, childlike, of her stern husband. But Jasper said only, "When I have learned skills worthy of my masters here, and worthy of your praise, my lady, then I will gladly come and serve you ever gladly." So he pleased all there, except Ged. Ged joined his voice to the praises, but not his heart. "I could have done better," he said to himself in bitter envy, and all the joy of the evening was darkened for him after that. How are we doing for time?
Only 5 to 10.
How much?
5 to 10.
5 to 10. Probably best leave it there. Ooh, the next one's a good one.
Is that oh, you can't say that.
Next one's a bad one.
I think
Imagine
Jasper and Talia got on well.
Someone's got reverb.
Who's reverbing?
Everybody.
Who is it? Okay, it's gone. Whoever just muted themselves, thank you. It was you. Katie, what were you saying, my darling?
I think Jasper and Talia would get on well.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Maybe Jasper is Sawyer? I'm really glad.
Ged's a little bit of a cock as well, to be honest.
He is.
Yeah.
But he is only 14.
Yeah, he is. Like, I know he sounds like kind of Sean Bean circa 2000, but he is like a child.
Yeah, and
I kind of love the way that Jasper hasn't yet really done anything wrong other than Jed thinking that he's snooty.
Yeah,
like Jasper's
like, "Welcome, what's your name?" And Ged's like, "Fuck you, buddy!"
It's like all, I mean, it's potentially just all in Ged's head, right?
I like that she's really careful to kind of keep it that way, that it's all like, oh, you know, it seemed to Ged that Jasper was mocking him and this stuff. It's never, like, it certainly doesn't start out that that she's sort of saying explicitly Jasper was a cock and then he was a cock to Ged. Malcolm,
totally
Malcolm fan.
Yeah, that was me, sorry. I'm done. I forgot. Sorry, Michael.
He's just lived in a village, so he has no experience of people from a different culture. So it's like totally understandable if he finds someone with a different style. Like, yeah.
And he doesn't understand posh boys.
It's his
oodles of arrogance.
It's his own insecurity, right? Like, he's read the guy as being posh, and so he's like, well, like, transferring that.
I like too that his he's kind of a bit prophesized as being this, like it says at the start, he's a great wizard, but also that he's supposed to be the greatest wizard of Gaunt, and he kind of holds that with like his arrogance around that is really, like, it's just called out on the page. Like, it's not, there's no messing about it. It's like, and yes, he was being a dick about it within the text. It's good.
Because to me, it sounds like he's on the trajectory to become like this super evil wizard at the moment. Because he believes he's all powerful already, and he thinks everyone else is a bit of a dick. So he's got this kind of superiority complex that's building up already.
I think he's like Anakin in book 2.
Yeah.
No spoilering, Frankie.
Okay.
Well, I like this.
I wasn't going to spoil. I wasn't going to spoil.
This hero on a journey. What could it be?
Oh, sorry.
Malcolm.
We'll make silence from now. Noises.
By the way, I started drinking to the word shadow.
Yeah, did you? Yes. After the first page, the first time we hit the word shadow, I thought, shit, I should have remembered about the drinking game, but I thought better not.
I remember the second I heard shadow, I was like.
Even the ship was called the Shadow.
I know, exactly. I hope you were drinking, Anders.
Well, I was drinking, but not to that specifically. I was really enjoying the thought of like what a Lonely Planet guide to the Isle of Gaunt would be like. Just like a whole set of like oblique riddles about where things are and are. Or like the thought of trying to buy a pint of milk in the Isle of Gaunt. Like, can I have some milk, please? Perhaps you can have some milk. Perhaps.
Perhaps the real milk was the friends we made along the way.
Oh my God.
I would hate it on Rogue, I think.
Gone.
It's because Gaunt is the north, lads.
It's even got the global stop right in there, hasn't it?
You're a bloody gaunt.
I have thought about this. I was like, well, they're all going to be from very definite places, and they all have accents, so they all have to have accents.
Well,
is Vetch Welsh? Oh yeah.
Vetch is from the East Reaches, guys. Weren't you listening?
Oh yeah. I immediately.
What about when you get to all the people with the boats? Where will they be from?
I'll have to work it out.
No spoilers.
But no. She spoiled that there were boats. Right at the beginning. She's like, there's a book, there'll be boats.
There are a fuck ton of boats.
I mean, the whole planet is called Earthsea.
Yeah, it's an time ago.
I mean, is that someone just being a bit cutesy? Oh, it's Earthsea. Or is it,
No, I mean, it's literally all just little islands. The map is just little islands.
I love the map so much. Oh, we won't be up. He's not gone anywhere. I suppose he's gone from one side of Rope to the other. I'll update our little map with that.
Do we have an Indiana Jones style dotted boats for things?
We do. I'm posting it in the comments of each recording with his latest travels. Right.
There was one mention of shadow in the last 10 minutes or so.
Did you
cast
drink
a shadow over his evening?
Were you drinking, my darling?
Only tea.
I guess I'll let you off. Right, hold on. Stop recording.